Now
Yeah, so
recording.
let's chat. What is normalization, Ani? How would you
Oh,
describe
in my mind?
normalization? Yeah.
Well, we've done all the exercises at this point. We've started with the Patrick. We've scaled up to, fem voice. But it's like, how do I keep this and then start and not from dropping down? And all of a sudden, my voice is masculine. What happened here? So it's more of like continually practicing to make the voice that you desire your main voice rather than, having drops all the time and just like, well, shit, this ain't for me, Chief. Nobody's going to believe I'm a girl on the phone if I just keep switching back and forth, right? So normalization is just ironing the kinks out.
So ironing the kinks out and kind of making a desired sound, whatever the desired sound happens to be, more automatic, right? We're kind of
Yeah.
playing around with a degree of automaticity, right? Being able to use your voice without having to think things through too much or feel like you're actively piloting, right? We want to kind of be on autopilot, right, with the voice.
Yeah.
So
It just happens. It's your daily driver.
it's
You
your
just
daily
like
driver.
you
Exactly.
turn the key and fucking the car is on. Girl voice mode has acted, or boy voice for that matter, has activated.
Desired voice, active, go, right? So what does this
Yeah.
process entail? So like you said, I think the first step is, right, can you even achieve? Are you achieving the parameters that you desire and refining your sense of what those parameters are? We start with this, and we go to this. Like, can we hear hello, 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 and find that quality, right? But often people will find that quality one step at a time, right? We find it on one word, and then we go like, hello, 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 hello. My name is Wellington, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And that sudden, expansion happens because we don't have sort of the muscle memory, the subconscious memory of producing those sounds across a wide range of sounds or
Vowels and
vowels,
consonants.
words, exactly. So the
Because like
first
O words are landmines for most people or use.
Yeah, often those will be sounds that I'm like, we're gonna have a bad time on these vowels. So what is the first step? So the first step is actually not physical or physiological or really anything to do with production. People often think about this as like a muscle memory thing, and I don't know that muscle memory is really the key ingredient. But it is sort of this process of making something subconscious, however we want to describe that, right? So the first thing is to internalize really strongly a sense of a target sound. So this is a skill that we would call like audiation and recall. If we don't have a strongly developed sense of what the sound that we're targeting sounds like in our mind's ear, we cannot normalize that sound, right? If I know that I can produce hello, 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 but every time I get here, I'm kind of surprised by what this sounds like, and I don't have an internal sense, I don't have a scheme for what this sound is like, then I can't continue speaking with this quality. I can't, um, start to normalize this because I haven't had the exposure to the sound enough to start to like string together full sentences. I remember very distinctly when I first started teaching and my femme voice was ass and people were like, teach me femme voice. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I guess. And I would do whatever the exercise or drill du jour was at the time and
Drill
wa-
tweets.
would end up with like, an R1 slide. I'd be like, yeah, yeah, all right. Can you now and it sounded
Jesus.
honestly more like ass than that, right? But like point being, we'd wind up with a sound that was like
constricted and fucked.
And then I would barely be able to talk because just maintaining all of those different individual parameters, right? At the time, we were using some really outdated ideas and we were like really like stuck. I guess they were, they were cutting edge at the time, but they're outdated now, regardless. When we start playing around with that, what we kind of feel is like, oh, I'm juggling 17 different elements and I literally do not have the cognitive load or I do not
Yeah,
have the cognitive like RAM to handle this cognitive load, right? Like it's
yeah.
so much. The amount of cognition I have to do to, you know, engage in all of those individual processes was too high. So,
I
for
think
that
if you're
reason, sorry, go ahead.
I think if you're thinking that hard about it too, that you're probably fucking up like something majorly along the way.
Along the way, right? If
Like
we
if
have to
you have
like
to think
actively
that
think,
hard,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It should start to be a relatively passive situation. So how do we start to sort of, what's what I'm looking for? Not engender, whatever. How do we start to develop this sense of passivity of the learning, of the vocalization that we're trying to do? One way is to take away a
Hab-
few of these complex features. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Habitualize it.
Yeah, right? Like, but not necessarily habitualize this, right? Often I will tell people, like, hey, what if you just start speaking with a lighter kind of configuration? Like, does it sound like what you want to sound like long term? Probably fucking not. Like, this is not most people's goal voice. But even having this as a template allows us to start to develop the sound, right? If this becomes normalized over time, then we can really start to think like, oh, okay, right? How can I change and manipulate this so that it is more desirable, right? So
Yeah,
if I'm here and I don't love this, but it's getting me out of this configuration. We're doing a couple of things. One is we're targeting a new sound, which is beneficial. We're moving in the direction that will eventually take us to a feminine sound, or right, vice versa. If you can only manage, like getting like this kind of sound you're trying to masculinize, and you can only just change size. That's fine for now, Start to layer on the elements that you can, but focus on one at a time instead of a whole assembly of different things. Those are going to be more difficult to juggle long term. So the first step would be, right, start to find this lighter sound, even if it kind of sounds silly. What will eventually happen is this will start to become habituated. And then the secondary benefit of this is that every moment we spend utilizing this sound is a moment that we're not reinforcing the neural pathways that are responsible for this sound. And often, when we are sort of playing around with normalization for the first time and like trying to like start to make these broad changes to the voice and then get them to stick, the difficult part is not so much finding acquiring a sound. That can be difficult, and it is, a trial and tribulation for all of us at different points, but that's not really the thing that like ends up being difficult. What's difficult
yeah,
is not using this sound, because inevitably this quality, our baseline default sound, whatever it may happen to be, is going to find ways to crop up. And what we have to do, right, the way the sort of metaphor I use is like, imagine you're in a sort of a forest, untamed wilderness. There's lots of trees, whatever, blah, 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 blah. You're walking through the forest every single day, and every single day your path is the same. You're going to wear a pathway in this underbrush, and over time, you're going to get a little path that develops. And then eventually, if you do it every single day for the rest of your life, that path is going to widen and it's going to start to get more space, right? The underbrush is going to pull back even further because you're trampling it constantly and maybe other whatever. So the problem becomes when I make a decision that I want to go away from this pathway that I've well at this point is well worn in my mind. If I start to move away, and often people who are trying to like find a, I don't know if I will call it more a more androgynous feminine voice. Maybe we'll call it like a dommy mommy kind of sound for
Oh, yes.
shorthand. Typically, people who are trying to find really low pitched, maybe they'll use words like husky or whatever kind of sultry feminine voices. Um, will struggle to maintain the new behavior because it is so tempting. It's like walking, a few meters away from my well-worn path in this forest and having to start to carve a new path in parallel at a similar pitch range, but with different weight and different sort of size behaviors and personality implications. So what we end up kind of doing is, like if I were trying to feminize this, I would find this kind of sound. Fine, this is great. Except that immediately, the second that anything happens, I wander immediately back to my baseline because that well worn path is still there. And I know that it's still there. And I will want to default to it all the time. So, in order to kind of step away from that, making a broad and obvious change, even if it isn't desirable, can help us to start to undermine that old pathway. Every minute, every utterance, every, conversation that I engage in with a different coordination is going to allow the undergrowth to start to reclaim that old pathway and take it over. So I'm going to avoid that pathway so I'm not continuing to reinforce it. We don't lose skills, right? We don't delete old habits. What happens is over time, our brain will say, we haven't used this neural pathway in a while. Maybe we can reappropriate these neurons for other tasks. And they will start to sort of dissolve those neural connections. But that's not what happens if we're continuing to use the same voice. There are plenty of
Yeah.
people, myself among them, I really enjoy using more masculine voices. I have a better, more convincing masculine voice now than when I started training, my femme voice.
Isn't that something?
Isn't it something? And
I was on the
uh,
way to find girl voice, but in truth, I found a better boy voice.
exactly, more sustainable and more masculine side. So regardless, right? There's all kinds of people who want to sort of maintain in parallel two different or multiple different kinds of voices, and that is fun and that is fabulous. But I think for a lot of people, the desire is to just move away from old shit and to new shit and then live there forever. So the first thing you can do is start to undermine old behaviors. And the better you get at undermining those behaviors and the longer you commit to this, the more those older behaviors and older habits are going to just start to go away. You're going to reach for a sound and it's going to be this one instead of this one, right? So fundamentally speaking, we can start with this idea that we're going to play around with, maybe starting with a higher pitch and a lighter weight if we're feminizing, because this behavior set is going to lend itself really well. I can hear sort of the underfullness. The next step for me is going to be to start finding a more full sound. Well, if I've already habituated a lighter, higher pitched sound, it's easier for me to start finding a smaller size on top of that than if I'm down here with a really heavy weight, low pitch, trying to
Find ways to get really small. This doesn't necessarily lead to girl voice.
as easily as this does. We're just kind of going against the flow a little bit. So once you
Yeah.
start to normalize even this, which sounds, I know, not ideal, we can start to allow this to become the autopilot voice. We can start to undermine habitual voice. And then we can start to kind of establish some landmarks in our practice. We can find labels to describe particular voices. So if I find that I'm achieving a really good, like hello,
Hello, hello, hello. Oh, I really like this sound. What can I call this voice so that I can remember what this is called, so that I can help sort of like hang that sort of auditory template for this voice on a label. I can conceive of what this sound is like and maybe construct it in my mind, but if I have a word, a phrase, whatever, to describe this set of sounds or this kind of sound, then I will more reliably be able to recall that sound. And that is why that audiation and recall sort of step is so important. If we have an underdeveloped sense of audiation, then I cannot imagine this sound. And more importantly, I can't imagine this sound saying novel things in novel ways. What do I mean by that? So, in order for me to start normalizing a voice, I have to A, have a sound target that I want to hit, and B, be able to imagine that sound saying sentences I've never said before, right? Someday
Yeah.
someone's going to walk up to me with a skunk and be like, "Ma'am, is this yours?" And I'm going to have to say, like, "I'm afraid I've never seen that skunk in my life," which is a sentence I've never practiced. You know what I mean? I have to
Yeah.
imagine the voice saying that sentence before
You
I
got to
can
get
then.
creative.
Exactly. And I have to imagine that maybe I'm going to say that with a sort of an impertinent kind of, what an impertinent question that was. And maybe I'm going to be like, "Oh, why? I've never seen that skunk in my life." And I'm going to put a little bit of an emotion behind it. I have to be able to imagine what that emotion sounds like before executing the sound. If I cannot execute the sound, or excuse me, if I cannot imagine the sound, then I cannot execute it. So being able to imagine, audiate that sound, and permutations of that sound. This can be as simple as thinking of like one, 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 one. All right, I like this sound. One, one, two, three, four, five. Holding on to that thought, thinking what that sound was like, and then imagining, okay, what if I said one, two, three, four, five in the same way, but maybe I sounded sad? What would that sound like? And imagining that same vocalization, but now with a sadder affect, or an angry affect, or a happy, joyous, whatever affect. Being able to think one, two,
Art.
three, four, five, right? Like I'm really sad. I'm thinking about that now, and I'm like really like broken up about it, right? But if I can't think of what it
Yeah.
sounds like first, then I can't sound sad. Can't sound like a sad girl counting, counting my tears, perhaps. So ultimately, that
I think
process
it's
of
also
go ahead,
important
Ani.
that when you're first exploring it, you're probably gonna fuck up what does sad girl sound like, right? And
Yeah,
you need to be okay that your sad girl might sound happy for
your
some reason.
mental conception of the sound might be on point, but your execution of the sound
Execution.
maybe a little poor, or you know sometimes the deficit is in this mental component, or the sort of auditory template. The specificity of the sound is not high. The ability to really envision and imagine that sound isn't particularly refined. Other times the deficit is in execution, and uh you can't assess where the deficit is if you haven't experimented and explored and tried variations, right?
Yep.
So,
Experiment.
yeah, experimenting, thinking through the sound, all of these can be um, audio of girls crying. Makoto,
For
very good for
reference. You
reference,
just
vocal
now for
reference.
today's sponsor. Do you hate getting stalked by the NSA for looking up audio of girls crying? Try NordVPN with my code Anna for Noodle.
Exactly. So yeah, once I have a sound that I like, for example, a sound that I use a lot in lessons is a voice I call Demo Girl. She's just, she's happy to be there. She's
She,
smaller. She's a little overfull. She has a tendency to be overfull because I feel like it's really showing the impact of size to a student can be really,
yeah.
really useful. Um, and we're aiming to kind of demonstrate that for students. I call her Demo Girl because literally she's the voice I use to demonstrate stuff to students.
Is
Yeah.
it a functional voice? Sure. Is it my personal favorite voice that I can produce? Probably not. But ultimately, it's a really good learning tool for my students, and I find that it's a useful voice pedagogically. All of that to say, I call her Demo Girl, and it makes finding Demo Girl really easy. The specific
Yeah.
configuration that led to Demo Girl was probably something I stumbled on 60 times in a lessons over the course of like, weeks with students. And then I just was like, oh, this is kind of like demo sound, huh? I was like, this is just the sound I use when I'm demonstrating. It was probably in a conversation with Hazel, of all people. And I was probably just
Yeah.
like analyzing my teaching. I was like, yeah, there's this voice I use. And then once you have the label,
Then you can just jump into that sound with a high degree of consistency, right? Because now I know that this is Demo Girl, and I know that Demo Girl has certain features of her voice that are tied into being a demonstration, right? She's perky, she's excited. There's a sort of like a little bit of a hair of overfullness, right, in the sound. She's
Yeah.
quite small. And this voice is really strongly differentiated between like this voice I call Demo Girl and like Bored Girl, right? Bored Girl is a voice that is, I think, similarly small, similarly light, but has a very different personality and isn't necessarily the same degree of perky as Demo Girl. And what this does is it helps me really strongly differentiate between those voices. So I can find Demo Girl, and then I can find, or, well, sorry, find Bored Girl, and then I can find Demo Girl pretty reliably and differentiate between them. And there are maybe
Yeah.
other ways that I could probably even further kind of highlight their like differences. You know, Demo Girls maybe performing femininity in a slightly different way than Bored Girl is. But yeah, ultimately that gives us the ability to like start to differentiate these clusters of behaviors because I don't have to think, with a high degree of like precision, like, oh, what is the exact weight that I'm targeting? Am I going to be a little bit more aspirate or a little bit more, like have a higher degree of closure? Am I going to have, this particular size or another particular size? I'm just kind of thinking of like the vibe that I associate with Demo Girl and the vibe that I associate with Bored Girl and then executing on that. That lets me make all of those processes so much more subconscious. And by making them subconscious, we aid in the process of normalization. So we can start to habituate these landmarks more easily if we have specific labels. I think specificity is really useful. So you can even think things like, yeah, this is like my, my high effort girl voice, like my high effort femme voice sounds like this. My, like
kind of Patrick Star voice sounds like this. These are all really useful labels. This is part of why when I'm giving lessons, especially to intro students, like the idea is like, okay, how would you describe that sound? Can you be really specific? Can you think of any cartoon characters that you are familiar with or whatever that have similar sound qualities and sound features? Because the more accurately we can map these features to labels, the more accurately we can reproduce them. Yeah, so that's why I think it's so important to really start to process the sound and label the sound as having a certain quality or being of a certain type of uh, quality. Sorry, I'm like distracted by chat right now. Cool. So that's like early stages of normalization. Are we thinking through the sound? Are we able to audiate the sound? Does the sound have a specific label in my mind that I can hang that hat on? Can I start to reproduce that sound consistently? Am I undermining my old voice? If I really want to normalize something new, I gotta undermine that old behavior. So is that like here? Yeah, right? Like even is this desirable? Is this my long-term goal? No. Is it a little bit, a little bit Patricky? Does it have a little bit of that underfullness? Fine. Because every minute I spend here is another minute I'm not reinforcing this shit. And if that's the goal is to get rid of this, then
Yeah.
this is what we're looking for. So yeah, if you're
Yeah.
actively trying to masculinize, jump into something that is more masculine. Is it your final goal? Doesn't matter. get to something that is more masculine, and that will start to develop those behaviors, and then start to make them more consistent and delete the feminine sound. If you're trying to feminize, even if this isn't super desirable to you, jump into this, because every second that you're here is 1 second that you're not, reinforcing the other behavior. So
Yeah.
this
It's like safe
especially,
states.
it's like literally save states. I love that. This is really useful, especially if you're playing, if like video games. I don't know what this is. If you were playing around with talking to someone who is really familiar to you, right? I use this with I recommend this to people all the time. That like you often are going to revert to old voice constantly. I will be in the middle of a lesson, or I'll be talking to Clover and Hazel in a chat and just be like,
Yeah, girls. So sisters, what is happening? What is the tea? What is the hot goss? And then I'll be like,
oh hey babe, do you mind? I'm gonna talk to Hazel and Clover for a little bit. Is that okay? All right, okay, thanks.
all right, so but tell me more, right?
And I will just subconsciously, yeah, flip to a voice that I'm
Oh,
used to
around
speaking to
other people.
around
Yes.
around other humans. Yeah, the whole talking to
Yes.
humans thing. So this is something that I fall prey to constantly. John is, I have like a whole ass relationship with him, and whole years of having a specific way of talking to him. So when I talk to him, that's what I fall into. My ability to execute vocal changes is fine. What I recommend in cases like this is a couple of specific things. So, um, I'm only hesitating because this is definitely a feeling of like, do as I say, not as I do.
Oh,
So
but I've done it. Do you
I
want to
feel
hear my pro tips?
feel fraudulent. Go ahead, tell me, Ani.
So when I was at work, because I work in the real world sometimes, when I hung out with like all my coworkers are dudes because IT is just mostly dudes. Your voice will naturally want to get drugged down when you're in like the man pit, right? So you have to like catch yourself while, and at first you won't be able to correct yourself while you're talking, right? It's just too hard for your brain to figure out. There's too much going on. You're trying to actually think and have a conversation, but at the same time, fix your shit. You can't do it. So you just re-rack in between and maybe do like some, it looks funny. With masks, it helps because they can't see you doing silent exercises behind your mask, which is really nice. But you'll slowly just like do like, and then scale back up, right? They can't hear that because you're behind a mask. Voice video calls are even better because you can just mute the mic and then don't share video, scale back up, and then try to normalize again. Just mute your mic, scale, do it again, read a sentence, say the thing you were going to say, and then just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Ani is whispering sweet nothings.
Yeah.
It's Ani's strat. I would say that one of the things that benefits us, if it's someone that is from right, I think in the case where it's work, it's like you don't know. Do you work with a transphobe? Are they secretly a TERF? Is it J.K.
Uh,
Rowling in a mask?
I,
Like,
I,
who
yeah.
knows? Who the
There's a
fuck knows?
couple questionable
And
individuals at my work.
in those cases, I would say be gentle to yourself, right? It's fine. Oh, I wasn't able to maintain the voice all day at work. Okay, says Sam. Like,
Yeah.
do what you need to do. If you need to do something, JKR Jordan Peterson.
The worst combo.
A horrible, horrible combo. Sounds
Ben
like
Shapiro's
Kermit.
defeat.
Point being that, like, right, we anticipate a certain degree of Ben Shapiro for that like 6-inch size boost, you know.
Yeah.
The the reality is that yeah, we have to find ways to reset. I would suggest the following. Start learning how to navigate to and from desired qualities fluidly. Okay? And here's what I mean.
Let's say I start with like All right, I'm gonna start with Demo Girl, okay? And we're gonna slowly see what happens. I'm gonna get really into this conversation. Let's pretend that I'm like really like special, interesting, really hard, blah 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 blah
Yeah.
blah. I really love, like the other day I was talking about Valheim for like 6 hours, and what I noticed was like I was like slowly kind of wandering, and not because I was like mad or wait, mad? Not because I was like intentionally trying to change the voice, but because I was just like distracted. And what would happen is over the course of that conversation, I noticed that my voice was kind of wandering into something else, right? And what is happening is just like if we imagine that wooded forest situation again, I just have wandered away from my desired pathway and back to the familiar. So I'm like, oh shit, I know this path. That's where I want to be.
Yeah.
Well, what we need to get good at, right? And part of, again, why audiation is so important and being able to recall specific sounds is so important to skill to develop is because if I'm a demo girl and I start to wander away, what will end up happening is I'll pass through some other stuff. I'm gonna get to like a point where I'm like, oh shit, wait, actually this sounds more like bored girl. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I've
I'm losing
changed.
the audience. The
Yeah, something
audience
is
is
happening.
leaving.
I fucked up. Well, if I notice because the label is different, right? Suddenly this doesn't sound peppy anymore. I could, and I think this is an important skill to start developing, immediately pivot back, right? And jump back into demo girl. That's a crucial skill to start to develop. But we can also, in sort of the context of a conversation, especially one where we're not necessarily convinced the other person isn't just, J.K. Rowling incognito. Well, if I'm
Yeah.
here, I took a pathway to get here. You know what I mean? I started
Yeah.
here and I wound up here. Surely there's some way for me to wander back towards my desired goal, right? So I would start practicing, read a Harvard sentence or just extemporaneously speak and be like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start talking and slowly wander away. And as I start to wander away, I'm going to listen, right? I'm going to really monitor for my individual cutoff of like, oh, okay, this is starting to sound androgynous to me, right? I have now achieved, it's like too heavy. I have like, wee you, the alarms go off. For me, this feels too far. For other people, right? Your individual sort of boundaries on these sounds are going to be a little bit different than mine. Totally fine, whatever. But as
Yeah.
you start to play around and start to find a sound, and you're like, oh, this is a little too far. Now practice coming from this sound back to your desired quality and then wind up back at your target, right? So just
Yeah.
kind of
Those are my
intentionally,
favorite exercises,
we
by the
gotta
way.
fuck up and go away and then come back to the sound over and over and over and over and over and over. We want to learn, if we kind of think of it again as a map, we want to learn how to find. I guess here's a metaphor, right? If you're going somewhere so sort of unfamiliar in your city, you probably have to look up directions. But there's probably nowhere in your city that you don't know how to get back home from. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
going back to your house is something you've practiced doing a bunch of times, and you're probably going to be able to find a path that's pretty efficient back home, um, reliably, right? Go out to the fucking
Yeah.
suburbs and you feel like, where the hell am I? And you're like, okay, but I know how to get back home, right? I don't know how to go anywhere else from here, but I can get back to my home. So similarly, we want to kind of start to think, if this is the target that I'm looking for, then I have to find like, oh, maybe I'm going to start with like a Julia Child kind of sound again, because I don't necessarily want to reinforce. I don't want to go from like my actual dead voice back there because I don't want to reinforce my dead voice, right? So maybe I'll do like
Yeah.
Julia Child and then slowly wander from Julia Child back to Demo Girl. Is that a problem? No, right? I'm just like learning how to navigate away and learning how to navigate back. If I'm doing, maybe Mickey Mouse, haha, oh boy, right? And then I'm just gonna kind of slip back into the more demo girl sound. Maybe if I have a couple different voices I like, and I do like that more bored girl sound quality, maybe I just practice shifting from like bored girl back to demo girl, and then similarly from demo girl back to bored girl, right? Um, the other day I was
Yeah.
doing like sort of like a Kate Blanchett What does she say? I think the first film I saw you in was Bent, wasn't it? Bent. And so now if I sort of find that sound quality again, maybe I start there and I slowly start to shift back to Demo Girl. Ultimately, I'm just trying to increasing my familiarity with all of these different potential configurations, all of these different clusters of behaviors that I've associated with specific labels, and bouncing around and learning to navigate my way from each of them back to Demo Girl. And it's so crucial that we do that, because the better you get at doing that, the more the further you are on your pathway to normalization. So that if in the middle of a conversation at work someone says something super dumb and you're like, bro, I like literally can't believe that you would even say that, because honestly, like this is how I talk at work, by the way. So I don't know what actual professional you can just jump back into. You can be like, whoa, bro, was a little too I really fucked up on that one. But if I slowly start to wander back, I can find my way back to Demo Girl, right?
I think we should do an exercise for future listeners that's like just the easy, clear-cut
version of
exercise.
this. Love that.
Yes.
So
all right.
What I like to do is pivots. So I like to think we're going to start with like a sequence of numbers, days of the week, whatever you like. And it could be
not Harvard sentences.
No, it could be Harvard sentences if you enjoy those. It could be the Pokemon of the Pokedex. Like, it literally doesn't fucking matter. So you start with a sequence and you go like, in some configuration that is not your desired sound. Like, I will use dead voice and desired sound, and we'll play around with those, but it could be anything. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I'm just choosing a number 6 and pivoting to a feminine sound on that at that point. We could think
1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right?
I'm just doing the sequence and picking different points along that sequence to translate from one sound to another. Then we might think, if I can make that broad shift immediate, right? That more immediate shift, can I do a gradual transformation? So maybe I'll pick, again, starting with a more dead voice. This was never what my dead voice sounded like, but let's pretend if we start here and I slowly start to shift towards a more feminine sound, and over the course of that same sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and maybe pick one number that's like your deadline. Maybe say by 8, I want to be confidently and completely in a feminine sound.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. See, 7 is still a little
7, 8, 9, 10. 8 sounded fine to me.
So we're going to play around with literally shifting slowly. Ani, can you show me the pivot one first? So let's say 6. I want you to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in mask, and then switch at 6 to a more feminine sound.
1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2. Wait, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Delightful. Can you slowly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
8, 9, 10, and by 9, let's say, get to your desired sound.
Okay. 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh shit! I scaled too fast. 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Great job. Now, I think you said I scaled too fast. Was that like, I mean, I don't necessarily feel like I put a specific, you have to scale.
I was getting by 7 at that rate. I would already have achieved my voice.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think with these
in my mind.
In my mind. Because how did you know that? That's interesting. How did you foresee that for yourself?
Just the ramp up. I could just kind of feel it.
You projected.
I've done this enough times.
Yeah, interesting. So
you
were able to imagine the sound that you were going to get before you got there. How fascinating.
Interesting. It's so strange. I talked about this. The exercise I was thinking about was actually even simpler for like the people that are just like scraping the surface. Just figured out how to do the size change and want to kind of push towards normalization that you gave me a long time ago.
Oh, I don't.
So
tell me.
With the Harvard, Yeah, with the Harvard sentence example, we're going to do the famous one, the first one. It's the birch canoe slid over the wood plank. So you start with just any word in the sentence. Oh, fuck, that was garbage. The birch canoe slid over the wood plank. And then you fuck it up. The birch canoe slid over the wood plank. You can fuck it up however you want. It doesn't matter, as long as you're not holding the feminine configuration. And then go back to the birch canoe slid over the wood plank.
Yeah. This kind of
But at
exploration
first, you won't be able to do that.
is quite hard.
At first, you'll probably be like, yeah.
I would say the babyest version of this
try again.
is like find the simplified, right? Clover and I were just talking about this. The simplified version of this is like do a warm start. Do whatever you need to do to achieve a sound that you like, whether that's scaling size, whether that's like a slow meander towards a sound that you like, and you're like, oh, I actually quite like this. Find a way to get to that sound and achieve that sound. So we're going to aim for a warm start. Then we're going to like drop that. And we're going to see if we can find that sound again. So you're going to restart. So without a big pause in between, you're going to scale, hey, 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 hello, hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pause. Take a breath. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And see if you get the same sound that you got.
Oh.
The longer...
That is good advice.
The longer the distance between these different phases, the harder it gets. Because it starts to really require that we have worked out that like skill of audiation and recall, right? We have to imagine the sound that we're looking for. We have to think, are there, as Clover is suggesting, are there somatic sensations that I can use to sort of anchor myself to that sound again? So in this case, as I started to scale or as I wandered into my desired sound on my warm start, I'm thinking, hello, 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 hello. And maybe I will notice, I'm just going to offer some suggestions. Maybe I will notice a shift in the position of my tongue, or perhaps a particular feeling of like something happening along the back wall of my throat, or whatever, right? If we can, we want to eliminate as many unnecessary feelings as possible. So, hello, 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 hello. See if you can even like get rid of those. But whatever things you do notice come along or accompany the desired sound in terms of somatic sensation, we want to incorporate into our idea about this sound. So then from here, I can allow things to relax. I like to literally just take a single deep breath and then like take a sip of water or swallow, like just the saliva in my mouth. Both of those actions are going to relax the configuration of your throat. And then you're going to
yawn.
Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, jump back into it. And then what you will want to do is start to build in some time. You're going to start to think, all right, I'm going to meditate on this. I'm going to think about the sound I just got. I'm going to relax away from it. I liked that sound. Now is a good time to start really like drilling down into like your mental conception of the sound and like see, can I compare the sound that I just got, maybe listening to a recording, can I compare that sound to my sort of auditory template of that sound? Were they that similar? Were they kind of in the same ballpark? Were they sisters? Were they twins? Right? Like, how close were those sounds to one another? And maybe that's also a good time to say, actually, I'd like to revise my auditory template now. I think the sound I want to target is actually a little smaller or a little lighter or maybe a little bit more this or a little bit more that. Slightly different pitch.
It needs pepper.
Right, it needs some pepper. Now is a good time to do some seasoning on the sound in your mind.
Yes.
But regardless, as you give yourself some time, even, 15, 30 seconds is enough. You're building in a buffer that is going to then require you to have to find that sound quality. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, again from nothing. So the better that you get at like jumping into that sound with a delay, the better you'll get at jumping into that sound in real life situations. Because again, um, that's the goal, is being able to walk up to the person at Starbucks and be looking at your phone and then be like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, can I get a whatever, right? Can I get a
Yeah.
grande latte, thanks, and get the fuck out of there. So, um,
I remembered the thing I was going to say earlier on the subject of like having
Mm.
patterns of behavior that you've associated with specific people. Um, in a situation where you are sort of practicing vocalization with someone with whom you have some deeply ingrained habitual patterns, right? You are talking to your lifelong best friend, you're talking to, a parent, a sibling, these people that you've known for a really long time. You have a lot of practice. Your brain knows what configuration you're used to speaking to them with. I like to set an intention with the conversation, and I like to set a time limit on the conversation. This does two things. The intention would be to say, "Hey, friend, loved one, acquaintance, whatever the fuck. Hey, I've been practicing my voice, been working on some voice stuff, and I would really love to show you. Do you mind if I show you in this conversation?" This does two things. It sets their expectations and it sets yours. If they're really someone that you're chill with, you can even say like, "If you notice that I'm wandering away from the kind of different sound and I'm coming back to like what you're used to hearing, let me know." The more sets of ears we have, the better this process is going to go. So, setting an intention. And then the other thing is to say, and I'd like to do this for like 5 minutes, if that's okay. Why a time
Yeah.
limit? If you decided, right, from now on, every time I open my mouth around this person, it's going to be this new voice. That's going to happen, right? You would, I 100%, if you like committed to that and you succeeded at that, you would 100% achieve a desired sound very shortly. I think there is a psychological component to saying, I'm going to do this from now on forever. That is a little bit difficult to surmount for a lot of people. I think it's the same sort of thing that plagues people who are like New Year's resolutions types, who are like, I've got to make a
Yeah.
design, I'm going to make a new change in my lifestyle, sleep
But
habits
it's
or
so
exercise.
massive.
Yeah,
It's a huge undertaking.
and it's the kind of thing where it's like the second that we break the chain, right? Like the example I use is like people who are like, I'm gonna go to the gym every day, and they go to the gym through January and February, and then like March 7th rolls around and it's cold, and it's for some reason it's like snowing and raining at the same time, and it's miserable outside, and you feel like shit, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna not. How would I not go to the gym today? Well, then March 8th rolls around, you're probably not going to go to the gym either because you've broken that behavioral chain. The same thing kind of happens with this kind of like, yeah, I'm committing to do this voice all the time now. The second that you break it, you're like, fuck it, I'm done. And then you just kind of like,
Yeah.
whatever, you just continue the interaction. And you're like, well, I've already made a mistake once, so I'm not going to recommit and reset. That's like the worst
Oh,
mistake I think that we can make. So instead, by
so
saying 5 minutes,
tangent.
tell me the tangent.
So Makoto brought up a point a while back that I wanted to bring up. Uh, how she says is basically they detach themselves from the voice that they're trying to put out and just focus on the qualities of the voice. So it's more like an interaction, if you will. You're not necessarily going, oh, I failed. It's more like, oh, at this point, my like just being aware, situationally aware of messing something up in the combo and just pushing through it, or rather just making a mental note of it to fix later.
The thing that I think that is so successful about that and why that's so important is that it also reframes the like
The
deviation in sound
failure,
instead
quote,
of being the
quote, end
quote
quote.
exactly, instead of being some kind of like personal or moral failing, it lets us instead reframe it as just like, no, I just, a little bit of a
Yeah,
different kind of
strategic ego
different
death.
execution. I just didn't quite get there on this. This is also, I think, the strength of the voice labels and kind of making up character voices. Um, I don't have to worry, like, oh, is this Hearth? Is that voice, is it truly Celine's voice? Like, who gives a fuck? right? It instead, I'm gonna think like, yeah, it's fucking bored girl. Do I like bored girl? Yeah, sure. Is it like the voice for me? Yeah, I mean, she's cool. She's chill. Do I like demo girl? Whatever. Is there any ego involved if I fail to get demo girl sound? Not really. It's just like, yeah, sure. That's not like, but it's not me. I'm not like attacking myself if I fail to
Yeah.
achieve the sound that I'm looking for. So the more that we're able to divorce these qualities from, yeah, B plus says, I kind of think of it like acting. It is literally like a voice acting kind of skill where you're just like, cool. The other thing that I think this does is it starts to promote this sort of um, fluidity and potential variation of a single voice. If we all think about like everyone you've ever encountered or everyone you've ever met has different voices that they utilize in different social situations, right? I speak differently to my brothers than I speak to my partner, than I speak to my friends online, than I speak to my parents, than I
Wow.
speak to professional like colleagues and coworkers and bosses and professors, and every single one of those people has receives a different mode of me, and vocally I'm kind of code switching between all of those different individuals. So having a wide range of sounds that you are kind of switching between also allows you to say, cool, I'm not married to.
I have to sound like demo girl all the time because one day I'm going to have to say like, "Oh, I'm so sorry for the loss of your goldfish." And I have to say it sincerely. And demo girl is not the voice to be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, "Oh, I feel so
Yeah.
bad for you. I'm so sorry for the loss." Like, I have to change something,
It's
right?
very stuck up bitch.
Yeah, it sounds like an
It's
asshole. So I have to be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that your goldfish died." And this is no longer demo girl, really? So I have to be able to like, yeah, one true voice. Violet Valkyrie says one true voice feels like a test I can fail. And that is, I think, super common. And when we build up, quote, the voice, that shit gets so scary. So
yeah.
we need to do
You
as
can
much as
only
we
fail.
can to eliminate stakes. We want this to be a low stakes task. So that's why the 5 minute time limit works. I'm not, the stakes aren't like, oh, my voice forever. It's my voice for the next 5 minutes. So if I fuck up and I like burp and I'm like, oh, sorry, babe, excuse me, and they go, okay, well, let me try. Oh, we've got like a minute on the clock. I might as well jump back to this sound. It's only 1 minute. And then over time, you can slowly extend that time. You can say, hey, can we talk like this for like 6 minutes? I'm going to put a timer on. Can I talk like this with you for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half hour? Can we do all of dinner prep together and I'll be trying to use my femme voice? It's a task. It's over. Maybe dinner prep takes 20 minutes. Maybe it takes an hour, but that's okay because by the time that's done, I'll have practiced undermining my old behaviors with this person, right? And that's I
Yeah.
think what's so crucial is like these specific behaviors that we have to undermine aren't just
Some kind of like default state. They're always contextual. It's always like, what is the context that I would use this voice in? Who is the person, or what is the group setting, or whatever, in which I would use this voice? And I have to mimic those conditions and start to undermine the voice specifically in those conditions. So, yeah, this even like was a realization I had because people would come to me over and over and over and say things like, I'm getting a great voice that I love when I'm talking to like the the cashier at the grocery store, or talking to
When
the
there's no
bank
stakes.
teller, or the drive-through window, or coffee shop, whatever person, barista. And um when I talk to my wife, I sound like this. Is there something we can do about that? And it was like, oh, yeah, it's because you have like a whole lifetime of habituated bullshit that you don't have when you walk up to a window at Starbucks and you talk to some random person. When you talk to your partner or parent, or, again, anyone that you have this like accumulated weight. It's like stopping an avalanche, right? The snowball has already gone.
Yeah.
It's already moving. So
I feel like it's more of a your relationship habituated
Habituated bullshit.
bullshit.
Yeah, that's it. That's a
But I
simplification,
also
but
feel like it feels like it's a high stakes game that is just made out to be that way in your head for some reason, and it shouldn't be. Because
yeah.
you're just like, oh, they're gonna hear me fail, and it's like 10 times worse because it's my friend, my wife, my coworker, and they're gonna think I suck forever. And it's just like they don't care. They literally don't care.
No one
Like
cares.
they
They
just
really
don't.
don't.
No one gives a fuck but you. I assure you. I assure you, no one gives a fuck but you.
Which is maybe not what everyone wants to hear or needs to hear, but honestly, there is a sense for a lot of us of like, oh, um, they're going to remember this interaction and they're going to hold it against me tomorrow. Or if I fail this voice now,
Yeah.
or if I try to do girl voice with them, they're going to compare it to my old voice and they're going to be like, there's something fake or weird. Or, and yeah, maybe they
Oh,
do,
oh,
but also they're going
good,
to get over
good
it.
antidote. Yeah, good antidote is for a while I didn't come out to everyone at work, right? I'd come out to some people at work, and I work at a larger company, so I'll do cards, Jesus Christ. I'll do video calls for training other people, right? And these are people that I had known or knew slash known, and they were used to like old Ani voice, right? But then like some random person that looks like Ani but doesn't sound like Ani comes on, and they're just like, what? Okay, cool, you're gonna train me now. That's fine. This is fine. They don't say shit. They're probably thinking a million things. Their brain is broken, but they don't say shit.
On that subject, or on the subject of contextualization of the voice, I have a couple of different specific things I like to do. So recently, that is in the last like 2 days, I've been playing around with this a lot with students, but it's something we've done in the past. I like to use sort of like stream of consciousness speech as a way of practicing vocalization, right? So let's say you've achieved a point where you can go to something and like find a sound that you like. You wake up, wake up. So that kind of shift, right, where you've achieved a sound that you like, but now you don't have the context in which to use it, perhaps, right? Like you're not spending hours a day talking to random people. You're not a VR chat kind of person. Totally fine. How can we start to use the voice consistently to practice these new behaviors and start to habituate this stuff? Well, some tasks that I actually really like. One is, and this is like sort of silly, but I think it's like a good application of the thing that we're going to do. So let me grab this link. So I'm going to grab this painting, which is
Oh
The Garden of
yes.
Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. And it doesn't have to be this painting. You could do anything. Anything that can be an external focus for you to like kind of think about
Yes.
and describe. But this is like a fucking fever dream painting, and it's really wild. And it's a visual feast. Everywhere you look, there's a hem. So
The longer I look, the crazier it
the longer you
gets.
look, the crazier it gets. So what I would do is just like randomly pick a section and be like, okay, so in the lower left-hand corner, there's like a cat with some kind of lizard in its mouth sitting next to Adam and Eve in the garden with a sunburnt Jesus Christ. And in front of
That
Jesus,
motherfucker is really sunburnt.
he took a lot of sun. SPF was not a thing at the time. And in front of him, there's this like three-headed dragon, tiny creature, and there's a pool of water with a bunch of other weird primordial creatures in it, and there's like a number of birds, and maybe I could just count the birds. Maybe I could see this like apple tree that clearly whoever drew it never saw an apple tree or whatever fruit that is. And then I could just continue describing this painting. This painting is giving me plenty
Yeah.
of things to look at and say out loud with my mouth, that I don't have to actively think about myself. By which I mean, like, yeah,
Yeah.
inventing extemporaneous speech to stay is really difficult. But just describing, like, yeah, and there's an elephant with a monkey on its back, and there's like a flock of birds flying out of a tower, and they're like queuing up to walk into the tower and then walk to the top or something and fly out. Like, cool.
Yeah.
It's an insane painting, and I'm just describing insane things. There's a human trapped in a clamshell. There's like a
Yeah.
bubble with what? Right. All of this is a
Clam me, daddy.
the feeling when you're clamming. We love to clam. So all of this gives me content to say that isn't the same as reading, right? I think reading feels like a different task than speaking. And
Yes.
when I go to read something, no matter how into the subject I am or whatever, if I'm just reading text off a screen, it doesn't feel organic in the same way that speech does. So give yourself something to talk about. Give yourself a focus, a point of focus. So I think this painting is cracked the fuck out and is fun for this purpose. There's a dude with music notes on his butt. How fun. So this is like maybe step one. This is what I use in like a lesson with someone who's got to like a point of habituation that allows them to start to experiment with this kind of stuff. But step two, right, you're starting to listen. As I'm describing what's happening, I have to keep in mind that recalled sound, that audiated sound, and go, oh shit, have I wandered away? This voice I'm using right now is not the voice I was using when I started, right? So I have to like jump back into that and monitor. The better I get at monitoring when I start to shift away, the better I'll get at interrupting myself and interfering with this kind of process in real time. The next step would be to start to contextualize this same task with your actual life. So what are some
Yeah.
things that you do every day? Ani, what is a game that you play every day?
Uh, I'm not going to advertise the gacha game I play because that's a sin against humanity. But I play MMOs that are degenerate and bad for people.
Okay, cool. So let's imagine we're playing especially something like a gotcha game. I love like a Magic the Gathering. I don't play every day, but I think that Magic the Gathering, the gameplay loop is really useful for exactly the task that I'm going to talk about. So I'll use
Perfect.
it as an
Yes. Let's
example.
just. I do play Magic
I
as
also,
well.
maybe we shouldn't advertise for Wizards of the
Unfortunately,
Coast either, but regardless.
you know,
Mm, So imagine.
announcing our next sponsor.
Imagine that I get right a hand, right? Every round of Magic, you shuffle your cards, you get seven, you pull seven cards, and you have to assess those cards and say, like, is this the fucking hand I want to start this game with, or not?
This is a good
Is
situation.
it a good situation for me? So I'll look at the hand and be like, okay, well, there's like, like 3 lands. That's a good number of lands for this deck. I know that that's the number of lands I need to get this off the ground. So that's nice. I've got this early game card that I can play that's going to help control the next couple rounds. I've got some plays for the next couple rounds of the game. This should be fine. Everything I just said, everything I just thought about the hand, I'm going to verbalize it. I'm going to say all of those things out loud to myself in my desired vocal configuration. And I will then play the game. And every time I draw a card, I'll be like, oh, well, okay, this isn't the card I was hoping for. What was I hoping for? Well, I was kind of thinking that I wanted to play on this card, this kind of thing. But, well, for now, I'll just put this in my hand. And I guess that means I can play this other card. The same decision-making process I'm already making, I'm just verbalizing it. Why is this important? Because it is helping you take thoughts that you are having and converting them into speech while navigating kind of complex tasks. But you're using the speech to reinforce the thing that you're already doing and using the task to sort of like prompt you for more material to say. It can be a really powerful tool. This same thing is really useful. Basically, what I'm suggesting is that you start streaming your activities, except without a stream. Just stream to yourself.
Become VTuber.
Become a VTuber. Just describe and narrate what is happening in the game. The better you are at the game, the more subconscious the game is for you, the better this is, the more useful this is as a tool. So I wouldn't suggest, if you've never played a game of chess, to try to do this and try to learn the rules of chess at the same time. That starts to become multitasking, which brains don't do. We just straight up don't do them. We only do task switching. We cannot multi-thread. That's not what our brains are good at. So if you have a game that is something you can play like literally like at any time of day and play with a high degree of like efficiency and like almost subconscious skill, the better this is going to be. So if you play a first person shooter, I think the pace and the rate of a first person shooter is a little frantic for me because I would 100% be like, they're shooting at me. Oh no, oh god, oh god, oh god. But I also am not good at first person shooters.
That's still perfect though. That's still really good because you're like, there's a whole bunch going on there. Like you're screaming, you're having emotion. You can just be like, fuck that guy, Jesus fucking Christ.
And you can just monitor and be like, fuck that dude.
There's a lot going on.
And then whatever, there's opportunity for you to describe and to state out loud things that you're doing. Like, oh shit, well I wanted to, didn't get that headshot or whatever. I don't know. FPSs are weird. So finally, the other way that we can kind of recontextualize the voice and utilize it in our day-to-day lives is to literally do this on a more mundane level and just like describe what you're doing when you're doing the dishes or like looking at my desk
pouring apple juice.
Exactly. Like I'm like literally like, okay, like I have incense ashes that I spilled on my desk that I should probably wipe up at some point, so I should go get a rag and do that. And I'm literally just saying the task that I need to complete or the task that I am actively in the process of completing. All right, time to go to the kitchen and get a rag. Okay, and then I'm walking back to the living room and I'm getting
make shit up.
Make shit up. Tell yourself a story. It literally doesn't matter. The more effective you get at this process, the more automatic the voice will become. So the reason, again, I suggest something like narrating what you're already doing is because the simpler the task is, the more you can focus on the voice, right? The voice has to be the thing that's the most difficult part of what you're doing. If you're doing two equally difficult things, it's going to be undermining your success. So take some time. No one has to think hard while doing a dish, you know? So literally just be like, okay, I'm going to get the sponge. God, this sponge smells like ass. Why haven't I replaced this sponge yet? Like, okay, time to put some soap on this sponge.
This sink is a fuck.
What am I doing with my life? Okay, cool. All right, let me just swirl the soapy sponge water on this and then, yep, we're ready to go. All right, time to move my hand. I'm just doing this. Do I do
fuck this shit? Where's John? John, come do the dishes.
I'm bored, babe. Yeah, all of that. And literally just describe something you are doing that doesn't take up a lot of your RAM. The more of your RAM it takes up, the harder it's going to be for you to execute. Okay, so things I wanted to talk about. I think I may have covered all of them.
Nice. That's good.
Yeah.
We're over time. I was about to be like,
we're over time. Cool. Does anyone have any questions, I guess, before we wrap? Anything on the subject of normalization or, similar? How do I stay in chest voice when I'm ascending in pitch, Clover? What's the secret? What's the secret sauce? I really just want to stay in chest voice all the time. Fury. Yeah, same. Literally same. Well, friends, thanks for listening. Ani, thank you so much for like paying for me to do lecture series basically on different components of the voice. Love you to death for that. I'm going to kill Craig, and I think we can be done. So friends, thanks for listening and have a great rest of your day.
I have one thing.
No, tell me.
What's next? What should we do next?
Let me end Craig and then we can talk about what's next.